Farmer Giles wasn't your typical farmer. He didn't have hundreds of acres or giant machines. Instead, nestled just outside the perfectly manicured lawns of Willow Creek Estates, was Giles Goodgreen's farm. It was small, maybe 2 acres, but it was bursting with life. Rows of bright green lettuce, plump tomatoes, and sprawling zucchini plants basked in the sun. Chickens clucked happily in their coop, and a goat named Gertrude nibbled contentedly on weeds. Giles believed in sustainable farming. He used no pesticides, relying instead on ladybugs and praying mantises to keep the pests away. He composted all his scraps, enriching the soil naturally. His farm was a little oasis of nature, a stark contrast to the cookie-cutter houses surrounding it. Giles grew all sorts of vegetables, fruits, and herbs. He sold them at a small stand right on his property, and his fresh, organic produce was a hit with the locals. People loved knowing where their food came from, and they appreciated Giles' dedication to healthy, sustainable practices. Children from the neighborhood would often stop by after school, their eyes wide with wonder as they watched the chickens peck and scratched. Giles would happily show them around, explaining how plants grew and why worms were important. He dreamed of turning his farm into an educational center, a place where kids could learn about nature and where their food came from. He envisioned school field trips and workshops on gardening and composting. Giles wasn't just a farmer, he was a part of the community. He donated extra produce to the local food bank, and he always had a smile and a kind word for everyone he met. He was a gentle soul, a man who loved the land and cared deeply about his neighbors. He was happy with his simple life, working hard to provide fresh, healthy food for his community. Little did he know, his peaceful existence was about to be disrupted by the arrival of a certain HOA president with a very particular set of rules. And that HOA president was Patricia, though everyone just called her Karen behind her back. Patricia took her role as HOA president very seriously. In her mind, she was the guardian of Willow Creek Estates, protecting its pristine image from any and all threats. Her days were filled with meticulously inspecting lawns, measuring hedge heights, and scrutinizing the color of front doors. Any deviation from the HOA's strict guidelines was met with a sternly worded letter, and repeated offenses could result in hefty fines. Patricia believed that conformity was key to maintaining property values. She saw Willow Creek Estates as a masterpiece of suburban perfection, and she was determined to keep it that way. She spent hours poring over the HOA bylaws, searching for any loophole or infraction that she could use to enforce her vision of order. Her neighbors often joked that she had a sixth sense for detecting weeds or a rogue garden gnome. Patricia's house was, of course, the epitome of HOA compliance. Her lawn was perfectly manicured, her hedges were precisely trimmed, and her flower beds were meticulously arranged. Everything was in its place, and everything was exactly as it should be, according to the rules. She couldn't understand why anyone would choose to live outside the lines, to deviate from the established norms. She saw Giles' farm as an eyesore, a blight on the landscape. The chickens were noisy, the goat was smelly, and the whole place just looked messy. In her opinion, it was a far cry from the pristine image that Willow Creek Estates was supposed to project. She couldn't believe that the other residents tolerated it, let alone supported it. Patricia considered Giles' farm a personal affront. It was a direct challenge to her authority and her vision of order. She knew she had to do something about it, to bring Giles into compliance and restore Willow Creek Estates to its former glory. She began compiling a list of supposed violations, determined to find a way to shut down Giles' farm once and for all. The battle lines were drawn, and the stage was set for a clash between two very different worldviews. The first violation Patricia noticed was the length of the grass along the edge of Giles' property. It wasn't wildly overgrown, mind you, just a little longer than the perfectly manicured lawns of Willow Creek. According to the HOA bylaws, grass was to be no more than 2 inches in height. Giles' grass, in some spots, dared to reach 2.5. Then there was the matter of Gertrude, the goat. While Gertrude was generally well behaved, she occasionally wandered a few feet onto the sidewalk while munching on particularly tasty weeds. Patricia considered this a major safety hazard, even though Gertrude was more likely to lick someone than bite them. The HOA rules clearly stated that animals were to be kept within their designated enclosures at all times. But the most egregious offense, in Patricia's eyes, was the escaped chicken. One sunny afternoon, a particularly adventurous hen named Henrietta managed to squeeze through a gap in the coop and went on a brief exploration of the neighborhood. She pecked at a few flower beds, scratched around in the mulch, and generally caused a minor commotion before Giles gently coaxed her back home. Patricia, however, saw this as a sign of complete disregard for the HOA rules. She immediately drafted a sternly worded letter, citing the escaped chicken as a clear and present danger to the community. She included photos she had taken of Henrietta pecking at a neighbor's petunias, emphasizing the potential for property damage and the risk of avian flu. She also mentioned the slightly rusty wheelbarrow parked near the edge of Giles' property, the stack of hay bales that were unsightly, and the hand-painted sign advertising Giles' Good Greens farm, which she deemed unprofessional and detrimental to the aesthetic appeal of Willow Creek Estates. Patricia was building her case, meticulously documenting every perceived infraction, determined to prove that Giles' farm was a menace to the community and a violation of the HOA's sacred rules. She felt she was protecting everyone. The letters started politely enough. Patricia, ever the stickler for proper procedure, began with a friendly reminder of the HOA rules regarding lawn maintenance and animal control. She included copies of the relevant bylaws, highlighted in yellow marker, just in case Giles had somehow missed them. She even included a coupon for a local lawn care service. Giles, being a reasonable man, chuckled and trimmed the grass a little closer. He reinforced the chicken coop and put up a small fence to keep Gertrude from wandering. He thought that would be the end of it. He was wrong. The letters became more frequent, and the tone grew increasingly hostile. Patricia accused Giles of deliberately flouting the HOA rules, of creating a nuisance, and of single-handedly lowering property values in Willow Creek Estates. She threatened fines, legal action, and even the possibility of having his farm shut down. The emails were even worse. Patricia would send them at all hours of the day and night, filled with angry rants and demands for immediate compliance. She CC'd the entire HOA board, ensuring that everyone was aware of Giles' supposed transgressions. She even started a neighborhood email list, using it to rally support for her cause and to publicly shame Giles. One email subject line read, "Giles Farm, a threat to our community." The email itself was a lengthy diatribe about the dangers of farm animals, the unsightliness of vegetable gardens, and the importance of maintaining property values. Patricia urged her neighbors to contact Giles directly and demand that he clean up his act. Giles tried to ignore the letters and emails, but they were relentless. They filled his mailbox, cluttered his inbox, and consumed his thoughts. He couldn't understand why Patricia was so obsessed with his farm. He was just trying to make a living, to provide fresh, healthy food for his community. He didn't see himself as a threat to anyone. But Patricia, fueled by her obsession with rules and appearances, was determined to make his life miserable. Finally, Giles decided he couldn't ignore Patricia any longer. He printed out a copy of her most recent email and walked over to her house. He found her in her garden, meticulously deadheading roses. He cleared his throat. "Patricia," he said calmly, "I need to talk to you." Patricia looked up, a sneer already forming on her face. "I assume this is about your farm," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Giles took a deep breath. "Yes," he said. "I understand you have some concerns, and I want to address them." He explained that his farm was more than just a business, it was a source of fresh, healthy food for the community. He told her about the children who came to visit, eager to learn about nature and where their food came from. He emphasized the importance of sustainable farming and the benefits it brought to the environment. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he said. "I'm just trying to make a living and contribute to the community." He even offered to share some of his harvest with her, a gesture of goodwill. Patricia listened, her expression unchanging. When he finished, she simply shook her head. "Rules are rules, Giles," she said. "You can't just ignore them because you think you're special." She pointed to the HOA bylaws, which she had conveniently brought outside with her. "It clearly states that all properties must be maintained in a manner consistent with the overall aesthetic of Willow Creek Estates. Your farm simply doesn't fit." She refused to acknowledge the benefits his farm brought to the community, dismissing them as irrelevant. She was only concerned with the rules, with the appearance of order and conformity. Giles realized then that he was dealing with someone who was completely unreasonable, someone who was more interested in enforcing rules than in understanding people. His attempt at a peaceful resolution had failed. He knew then that the conflict was far from over. The battle for Willow Creek Estates had just begun. Patricia, emboldened by what she perceived as Giles' weakness, doubled down on her efforts. She began meticulously documenting every aspect of the farm, taking photographs and videos to build an even stronger case against him. She timed the roosters crowing, measured the height of the weeds, and even counted the number of flies buzzing around the compost pile. She sent more letters, more emails, and even started posting flyers around the neighborhood, warning residents about the dangers of Giles' farm. She claimed that the farm was attracting vermin, spreading disease, and creating a general nuisance. She urged her neighbors to file complaints with the HOA and to boycott Giles' Good Greens farm. Patricia even started making anonymous phone calls to the local health department, reporting Giles for various supposed violations. She claimed that he was selling uninspected produce, operating without the proper permits, and creating a public health hazard. When the health inspector arrived, Giles was surprised but cooperative. He showed the inspector around the farm, explaining his sustainable practices and demonstrating his commitment to food safety. The inspector found no violations and even complimented Giles on the cleanliness and organization of his operation. Patricia was furious when she learned that the health department had given Giles a clean bill of health. She accused the inspector of being biased and demanded a second inspection. She even tried to bribe a local reporter to write a negative story about Giles' farm, but the reporter refused, sensing that Patricia's vendetta was based on personal animosity rather than legitimate concerns. Patricia was becoming increasingly desperate, resorting to increasingly outlandish tactics to try to shut down Giles' farm. She was consumed by her obsession with rules and appearances, blinded to the positive impact Giles was having on the community. Her relentless pursuit of conformity was about to backfire in a spectacular way. One morning, Patricia was particularly incensed by the sound of Reginald, Giles' rooster, crowing. Reginald was a magnificent bird, with vibrant plumage and a powerful voice. He crowed every morning at the crack of dawn, a natural alarm clock for the neighborhood. Most people found it charming, a reminder of a simpler, more rural life. Patricia, however, found it to be an intolerable disturbance. She checked the HOA bylaws again, searching for any regulation regarding noise levels. She found a clause that prohibited excessive noise that could disturb the peace and quiet of the neighborhood. She decided that Reginald's crowing definitely qualified as excessive noise. Without hesitation, Patricia called the police. She reported Giles for violating the noise ordinance, claiming that Reginald's crowing was keeping her awake at night and causing her undue stress. She demanded that the police take immediate action to silence the rooster. When the police arrived at Giles' farm, they were greeted by the sight of Reginald strutting proudly around the yard, crowing at the top of his lungs. The officers couldn't help but smile. They had never received a noise complaint about a rooster before. They spoke to Giles, explaining the situation and asking him to keep the rooster quiet. Giles, understandably frustrated, explained that roosters crowed, it was what they did. He offered to move Reginald to a different part of the farm, further away from Patricia's house, but he couldn't guarantee that it would solve the problem entirely. The officers, being reasonable people, decided to talk to Patricia. They explained that roosters were common in rural areas and that Reginald's crowing was hardly excessive. They gently suggested that she try wearing earplugs or using a white noise machine to block out the sound. Patricia, however, was not satisfied. She insisted that the police arrest Giles and confiscate the rooster. She accused them of being incompetent and demanded to speak to their supervisor. The officers, realizing that they were dealing with a classic Karen, politely excused themselves and left the farm, shaking their heads in disbelief. Patricia's attempt to weaponize the police had failed spectacularly. The police officers, after leaving Giles' farm, drove slowly down Patricia Street. Officer Miller, the younger of the two, chuckled. "Can you believe that, Sergeant? Complaining about a rooster crowing. What did she expect, living next to a farm?" Sergeant Davis, a veteran of the force, sighed. "You get all kinds, Miller. Some people just aren't happy unless they're complaining about something." He shook his head. "Poor guy, that farmer. Seems like he's just trying to make an honest living." They pulled up to Patricia's perfectly manicured lawn. Patricia was waiting for them, arms crossed and a furious look on her face. "Well?" she demanded. "Did you arrest him? Did you silence that infernal rooster?" Officer Miller spoke first, trying to keep a straight face. "Ma'am, we spoke to Mr. Giles, and he's agreed to try to keep the rooster further away from your property. However, we can't guarantee that it will eliminate the noise completely." Patricia's face turned even redder. "That's not good enough," she shrieked. "I demand that you arrest him and confiscate the rooster. He's violating the noise ordinance, and he's disturbing my peace." Sergeant Davis stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, we understand your frustration, but we can't arrest someone for owning a rooster. Roosters crow. It's what they do. We're not going to waste our time and resources on something so trivial." He paused, looking directly at Patricia. "Frankly, ma'am, we have more important things to worry about. We're dealing with real crime, not rooster complaints. I suggest you find a more constructive way to spend your time." He gave her a pointed look, then turned to Officer Miller. "Let's go, Miller." As they drove away, Sergeant Davis said, "Miller, make a note in the file, HOA complaint, unfounded. Complainant appears to be excessively sensitive to noise. Advise against further action." He chuckled. That should keep her quiet for a while. The encounter with Patricia, though frustrating, reinforced their support for Giles and his farm. They saw her complaint for what it was, a petty attempt to bully a good neighbor. Patricia, seething with rage, decided that if the police wouldn't help her, she would take matters into her own hands. She stormed into the next HOA board meeting, determined to get the board to take action against Giles. She presented her meticulously documented evidence, including photographs, videos, and even a recording of Reginald's crowing. "This is outrageous," she declared, slamming her fist on the table. "Giles' farm is a clear violation of our HOA rules, and it's ruining the quality of life in Willow Creek Estates. We need to do something about it, and we need to do it now." She demanded that the board issue Giles a cease and desist order, forcing him to shut down his farm immediately. She argued that his farm was lowering property values, attracting vermin, and creating a general nuisance. She even suggested that the HOA should sue Giles to force him to comply with the rules. The other board members listened patiently, but they were hesitant to take such drastic action. They knew that Giles' farm was popular with many residents, and they didn't want to alienate the community. They also knew that Patricia had a reputation for being overly zealous and that her complaints were often exaggerated. "Patricia, we understand your concerns," said Mr. Henderson, the board treasurer, "but we need to consider all sides of this issue. Giles' farm is a valuable asset to our community, and we don't want to do anything that would harm it." Mrs. Rodriguez, the board secretary, agreed. "I've bought produce from Giles' farm myself, and it's wonderful. My kids love visiting the animals, and it's a great learning experience for them." Patricia was furious. She couldn't believe that the other board members were siding with Giles. She accused them of being weak and ineffective and threatened to resign from her position as president if they didn't take action against the farm. The stage was set for a showdown, a battle between Patricia's rigid adherence to the rules and the community's love for Giles' farm. The future of Willow Creek Estates hung in the balance. Word of Patricia's crusade against Giles' farm spread quickly through Willow Creek Estates. At first, many residents were indifferent, seeing it as a minor squabble between neighbors. But as Patricia's tactics became more extreme, the flyers, the anonymous phone calls, the attempts to bribe reporters, people began to take notice. And what they noticed was that Patricia was being unreasonable, even bullying. They saw that Giles was a kind, hard-working man who was providing a valuable service to the community. They appreciated his fresh produce, his commitment to sustainability, and his willingness to share his knowledge with others. Mrs. Peterson, who lived across the street from Giles, organized a petition in support of the farm. She went door to door, explaining the situation and asking her neighbors to sign. Almost everyone she spoke to was happy to sign, expressing their gratitude for Giles and his farm. Mr. Johnson, a retired teacher, offered to help Giles with his marketing, creating a website and social media pages to promote the farm. He also volunteered to give tours of the farm to school groups, turning Giles' dream of an educational center into a reality. Even some of the HOA board members, initially hesitant to take sides, began to publicly express their support for Giles. They realized that Patricia's actions were alienating the community and that they needed to find a way to resolve the conflict peacefully. A sense of community solidarity began to emerge, a collective determination to protect Giles and his farm from Patricia's relentless attacks. People started buying more produce from Giles, volunteering their time to help with the farm chores, and even organizing potlucks and picnics on the farm property. Giles was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. He had always believed in the power of community, but he never realized how much his neighbors cared about him and his farm. He knew then that he wasn't alone in this fight. He had the entire community behind him, ready to stand up to Patricia and protect his way of life. The HOA board, recognizing the growing tension and the clear division within the community, decided to call a town meeting. They hoped to provide a forum for residents to voice their concerns and to find a way to resolve the conflict over Giles' farm. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at the Willow Creek Estates Community Center. The turnout was enormous. Residents packed the community center, eager to express their opinions and to support either Giles or Patricia. The atmosphere was tense, with a clear divide between those who supported Patricia's strict adherence to the rules and those who valued Giles' farm and its contribution to the community. Mr. Henderson, the board treasurer, opened the meeting by explaining the purpose and the ground rules. He emphasized the importance of civility and respect, urging residents to listen to each other and to avoid personal attacks. Patricia was the first to speak. She presented her case against Giles' farm, reiterating her complaints about the noise, the unsightliness, and the supposed violations of the HOA rules. She argued that Giles was disrespecting the community and lowering property values. Then it was Giles' turn. He spoke calmly and passionately about his farm, explaining its importance to the community and its commitment to sustainability. He talked about the children who visited the farm, the fresh produce he provided, and the sense of community that his farm fostered. He addressed Patricia's concerns directly, explaining the steps he had taken to mitigate the noise and to keep the farm clean and organized. He emphasized that he was willing to work with the HOA to find a solution that would satisfy everyone. The community listened intently, their faces reflecting a range of emotions, from anger and frustration to sympathy and support. The fate of Giles' farm, and perhaps the future of Willow Creek Estates, hung in the balance. After Giles and Patricia presented their cases, the floor was open to the community. One by one, residents stepped up to the microphone to share their thoughts and feelings. Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor who organized the petition, spoke first. "I've lived in Willow Creek Estates for 20 years, she said, and I've never seen anything like this. Patricia's vendetta against Giles is ridiculous. He's a good neighbor, a hard-working farmer, and a valuable member of our community. We should be supporting him, not trying to shut him down." Mr. Johnson, the retired teacher, spoke next. "Giles' farm is an educational resource for our children," he said. "He's teaching them about nature, about sustainability, and about where their food comes from. That's something we should all be grateful for." Even some of the HOA board members spoke in support of Giles. Mr. Henderson, the treasurer, admitted that he had initially been skeptical of the farm, but he had come to appreciate its value. "Giles has made a real effort to comply with the HOA rules," he said, "and I believe we should be willing to work with him to find a solution that works for everyone." Mrs. Rodriguez, the secretary, echoed his sentiments. "My children love visiting Giles' farm," she said. "It's a wonderful place, and I don't want to see it go away." As more and more residents spoke in support of Giles, Patricia grew increasingly isolated. Her arguments about noise, unsightliness, and property values seemed petty and insignificant in comparison to the outpouring of support for the farm. She sat silently, her face growing redder and redder with each passing minute. Giles, listening to the heartfelt testimonials from his neighbors, felt a surge of gratitude and hope. He knew that he had the community on his side, and he was confident that they would find a way to protect his farm. The tide had turned, and the sweet karma was about to begin. When it was Patricia's turn to speak again, she simply repeated her earlier arguments, emphasizing the importance of following the HOA rules and maintaining property values. She showed more photos of Reginald the rooster, the slightly overgrown grass, and the unsightly hay bales. She spoke in a monotone voice, her words lacking the passion and conviction that had characterized her earlier tirades. The community, having already heard her arguments, listened politely but without enthusiasm. They had made up their minds. They were on Giles' side. As Patricia sat down, a wave of murmuring rippled through the crowd. It was clear that her message was not resonating. The community was ready for a change, ready to embrace a more inclusive and compassionate vision of Willow Creek Estates. Mr. Henderson, sensing the shift in momentum, proposed a vote. "We have two options," he said. "We can continue to enforce the HOA rules as they are currently written, which would likely force Giles to shut down his farm. Or, we can amend the rules to allow for small-scale farming, which would allow Giles to continue operating his farm while still maintaining the overall aesthetic of our community." He explained that amending the rules would require a 2/3 majority vote. He urged residents to consider both sides of the issue carefully before casting their ballots. The voting process was quick and efficient. Residents lined up to cast their ballots, their faces reflecting a mixture of hope and anticipation. The atmosphere was electric, with a palpable sense of excitement and possibility. As the votes were being counted, Patricia sat alone, her face a mask of anger and disappointment. She knew that she had lost. She had underestimated the power of community, the strength of human connection, and the simple joy of fresh, healthy food. The sweet karma was about to be served. Mr. Henderson announced the results of the vote. By a vote of 85% to 15%, the residents of Willow Creek Estates have voted to amend the HOA rules to allow for small-scale farming. A roar of applause erupted from the community center. Residents cheered, hugged, and high-fived each other, celebrating their victory and their commitment to supporting Giles and his farm. Giles, overwhelmed with emotion, wiped tears from his eyes. He had won. The community had chosen to embrace his vision of a sustainable, community-focused Willow Creek Estates. Patricia, however, was devastated. She sat alone in the corner, her face a mask of disbelief and anger. She couldn't believe that the community had rejected her, that they had chosen to prioritize a farm over the sacred HOA rules. As the celebration continued around her, Patricia stormed out of the community center, muttering angrily to herself. She couldn't understand why everyone was so blind to the importance of rules and order. She felt betrayed by her neighbors, by the HOA board, and by the entire community. The amended HOA rules allowed Giles to continue operating his farm, subject to certain reasonable restrictions. He had to keep the farm clean and organized, minimize noise levels, and ensure that his animals were properly contained. But these were minor concessions, and Giles was happy to comply. The victory was not just for Giles, it was for the entire community. It was a testament to the power of community solidarity, the importance of standing up for what you believe in, and the simple joy of fresh, healthy food. The sweet karma had been served, and Willow Creek Estates was a better place because of it. The community had spoken and Karen's reign was over. With the HOA rules amended, Giles Good Green's farm flourished. He expanded his operation, adding more vegetable beds, fruit trees, and even a small apiary for honey production. He hired a few local teenagers to help with the farm work, providing them with valuable job skills and a sense of purpose. The farm became even more of a community hub, hosting regular farmers markets, educational workshops, and even summer camps for children. Giles' dream of creating an educational center had finally come true. Willow Creek Estates was transformed from a sterile, rule-bound community into a vibrant, welcoming neighborhood, all thanks to a small farm and a little bit of sweet karma. Patricia, however, did not fare so well. After her humiliating defeat at the town meeting, she became increasingly isolated. Her neighbors, once friendly and polite, now avoided her, whispering behind her back and casting disapproving glances her way. She lost her position as HOA president, replaced by Mr. Henderson, who was committed to fostering a more inclusive and community-oriented approach. Without her role as the enforcer of the rules, Patricia felt lost and insignificant. She tried to continue her campaign against Giles, filing complaints with various government agencies and even attempting to sabotage his farm. But her efforts were futile. The community rallied around Giles, defending him against her petty attacks and exposing her lies and exaggerations. Patricia became a pariah in Willow Creek Estates, a cautionary tale about the dangers of rigid adherence to rules and the importance of community spirit. She had learned a valuable lesson, albeit a painful one, that rules are meant to serve people, not the other way around. And sometimes, the greatest reward comes from letting go of control and embracing the beauty of imperfection. Giles Farm stood as a reminder of that lesson, a symbol of hope, community, and sweet, sweet karma. Patricia's attempts to sabotage Giles' farm were comical, in a way. She tried everything she could think of to make his life miserable, but nothing seemed to work. She spread rumors about him selling contaminated produce, but no one believed her. She filed complaints with the health department, the building inspector, and even the Environmental Protection Agency, but each time, the authorities found no violations. She even tried to convince Gertrude, the goat, to eat Giles' prized tomato plants, but Gertrude, being a loyal and well-fed goat, refused to cooperate. Patricia's efforts were not only ineffective but also backfired, further solidifying the community's support for Giles. One day, Patricia tried to sneak onto Giles' property in the middle of the night to spray weed killer on his vegetable beds. But Giles had installed a security camera after her earlier attempts at sabotage, and he caught her in the act. He didn't call the police. Instead, he simply posted the video on the community Facebook page with the caption, "Is this the behavior of a responsible HOA president?" The video went viral, and Patricia became a laughingstock. People from all over Willow Creek Estates mocked her, creating memes and parodies of her failed attempts to sabotage Giles' farm. The incident was the final nail in the coffin for Patricia's reputation. She became a recluse, rarely leaving her house and avoiding all contact with her neighbors. She spent her days obsessively cleaning her already spotless house and poring over the HOA bylaws, searching for any loophole or infraction that she could use to get revenge on Giles. But her efforts were in vain. The community had moved on, embracing a new era of cooperation, inclusivity, and sweet, sweet karma. Patricia was left behind, a relic of a bygone era, a reminder of the dangers of rigid rules and the importance of community spirit. But the sweet karma didn't end there for Patricia. Losing the HOA presidency was a blow, but what followed was even more impactful. Mr. Henderson, the new president, spearheaded an effort to revise the HOA's entire approach. He believed in common sense, community building, and reasonable compromise, a stark contrast to Patricia's iron-fisted rule. He organized workshops on gardening, composting, and sustainable living, inviting Giles to lead them. The workshops were a huge success, attracting residents from all over Willow Creek Estates. People learned how to grow their own vegetables, reduce their carbon footprint, and create beautiful, eco-friendly gardens. Mr. Henderson also established a community garden on a vacant lot, providing residents with a space to grow their own food and connect with their neighbors. The garden became a symbol of the new Willow Creek Estates, a place where people worked together, shared their knowledge, and celebrated the bounty of nature. Patricia, watching from her window, could only seethe with envy and resentment. She couldn't understand why everyone was so excited about gardening and composting. In her mind, it was all just a waste of time and effort. She preferred the sterile perfection of her manicured lawn and her perfectly arranged flower beds. But the community had moved on. They had embraced a new vision of Willow Creek Estates, a vision that valued community, sustainability, and sweet, sweet karma. Patricia was left behind, a relic of a bygone era, a reminder of the dangers of clinging to rigid rules and the importance of embracing change. And as Giles Farm continued to thrive, providing fresh food, educational opportunities, and a sense of community to Willow Creek Estates, Patricia's sweet karma became even more pronounced. She had lost everything, and Giles had gained it all. Even Patricia's own house seemed to reflect her downfall. The perfectly manicured lawn began to show signs of neglect, with a few stray weeds daring to poke through the pristine green carpet. The hedges, once precisely trimmed, started to grow wild and unruly. The flower beds, once meticulously arranged, became overgrown and chaotic. It was as if the spirit of Giles Farm was slowly seeping into Patricia's property, reclaiming the land from her rigid control and transforming it into something more natural and untamed. One day, a group of children from the neighborhood, emboldened by the new spirit of community, decided to play a prank on Patricia. They snuck onto her property and planted a sunflower seed in the middle of her perfectly manicured lawn. Patricia, upon discovering the sunflower, was furious. She tried to pull it out, but the roots were too deep. She tried to spray it with weed killer, but the children intervened, shaming her for trying to harm a beautiful flower. The sunflower continued to grow, towering over Patricia's house, a symbol of the community's triumph over her rigid rules and her petty vendetta. It was a living testament to the power of nature, the beauty of imperfection, and the sweet, sweet karma that had transformed Willow Creek Estates. And as the sun set each day, casting a golden glow over Giles' flourishing farm and Patricia's increasingly wild yard, the community could only smile, knowing that they had chosen the right path, a path of compassion, cooperation, and sweet, sweet karma. The story of Patricia and Giles became a local legend, a reminder that even the most rigid rules can be bent, and that even the most stubborn hearts can be softened, by the power of community and the simple joy of a sunflower in a lawn. Giles' Good Greens farm continued to thrive, becoming a model for sustainable agriculture and community engagement. He expanded his educational programs, offering scholarships to underprivileged children and partnering with local schools to provide hands-on learning experiences. He even started a program to train other aspiring farmers, sharing his knowledge and expertise with a new generation of agricultural entrepreneurs. Giles became a local celebrity, receiving awards and recognition for his contributions to the community and his commitment to sustainability. People came from all over to visit Giles' farm, to learn about his methods, and to experience the joy of fresh, healthy food. Willow Creek Estates, once known for its rigid rules and sterile environment, became a destination for those seeking a more authentic and community-oriented way of life. And Patricia? She remained a recluse, a cautionary tale whispered among the residents of Willow Creek Estates. Some say that she eventually moved away, unable to bear the constant reminder of her defeat. Others say that she remained in her house, obsessively cleaning and poring over the HOA bylaws, forever trapped in her own world of rigid rules and petty grievances. But whatever her fate, one thing was certain, the sweet karma had been served, and Willow Creek Estates was a better place because of it. The story of Patricia and Giles became a local legend, a reminder that even the most stubborn hearts can be softened by the power of community and the simple joy of a sunflower in a lawn. And as the sun set each day, casting a golden glow over Giles' flourishing farm, the community could only smile, knowing that they had chosen the right path, a path of compassion, cooperation, and sweet, sweet karma. The end. Or perhaps, just the beginning of a new and better chapter for Willow Creek Estates. The moral of the story, as many in Willow Creek Estates would tell it, is that a little bit of kindness and understanding can go a long way. Rules are important, yes, but they shouldn't come at the expense of community and compassion. Sometimes, it's okay to bend the rules, to embrace imperfection, and to prioritize people over regulations. Giles Farm became a symbol of that lesson, a reminder that even the most rigid communities can be transformed by the power of human connection. It showed everyone that fresh food, a sense of community, and a little bit of sweet karma can make the world a better place. Patricia's story, on the other hand, serves as a warning. It's a reminder that clinging too tightly to rules and regulations can lead to isolation and unhappiness. It shows that it's important to be open-minded, to be willing to compromise, and to value people over property values. In the end, the story of Patricia and Giles is a story about two different worldviews, two different ways of approaching life. One worldview is based on fear, control, and rigid adherence to rules. The other is based on compassion, community, and a willingness to embrace change. And as Willow Creek Estates learned, the latter worldview is always the better choice. It leads to a more vibrant, welcoming, and sustainable community, a place where people can thrive and where sweet karma is always just around the corner. So, the next time you're faced with a conflict, remember the story of Patricia and Giles. Remember the power of community, the importance of compassion, and the simple joy of a sunflower in a lawn. And always choose kindness, because in the end, that's what truly matters. That's what will make the world a better place. And that's what will bring you the sweetest karma of all. And so, the tale of Giles Good Green's farm and Patricia, the HOA president who tried to shut it down, became a beloved story in Willow Creek Estates. It was a story that was told and retold, a reminder of the importance of community, compassion, and standing up to bullies. It taught the residents of Willow Creek Estates to use their common sense, to think for themselves, and to not blindly follow rules without considering their impact. It showed them that it's okay to challenge authority, to question the status quo, and to fight for what you believe in. It also taught them the importance of supporting their neighbors, of working together to create a better community, and of embracing diversity and inclusivity. It reminded them that everyone has something to offer, and that even the smallest acts of kindness can make a big difference. And perhaps most importantly, it taught them the power of sweet karma. It showed them that what goes around comes around, and that if you treat others with respect and compassion, you'll be rewarded in kind. So, the next time you see someone being bullied, remember the story of Giles and Patricia. Remember the power of community, the importance of compassion, and the simple joy of a sunflower in a lawn. And always stand up for what's right, even if it means challenging authority or bending the rules. Because in the end, that's what truly matters. That's what will make the world a better place. And that's what will bring you the sweetest karma of all. It's about standing tall, together. The end.